Great. So after reviewing GitHub, I'm going to talk a little bit about the technologies that run websites and how you actually tell what's running a website out there. There's a really neat plugin for Chrome that tells you all the technologies behind any website out there. So we'll play with that one a little bit. And then get into our two main topics for the night. The first is search engine optimization. SEO is something that a lot of people think of at the very, very end of a website project. This is basically how you get Google to pull up your website first when you search for a topic. This is really important because the way that most people find what they're going to go to for a new site they don't know the name of is sitting on Google or one of the other search engines. And so SEO is pretty critical to a website. We'll talk about some of the factors that go into people being able to find your website. And then the next thing is a model called the Lean Launchpad, and some outgrowths of that called the Business Model Canvas and the Value Proposition Canvas. Basically, these are business tools for assessing a new business startup, or in this case, very specifically focused towards a new website business. And just having a little bit of structure behind how you think about whether a website is going to be profitable and whether it's going to meet the needs of your users helps a lot in thinking about those users as you're designing your site. Now, none of the sites we're going to be doing for the projects here, of course, are going to go out and make real money. Maybe you'll spin up and be the next Facebook after you leave this class. But I want to do the design and the presentations on these as if they are. As if you're trying to pitch your next a great new website business. Just because the exercise of thinking through the profitability and the users behind your website make you focus on the right things for design. And design is really designed for a set of users, and the more you define those users, the better your website will be. So this is the same slide of head up for a couple of weeks here. I'm not going to go through in a terminal window this again. But just a reminder, this git add, git commit, git push is the engine that makes GitHub work. And every time you make a substantial change, you should be going through this git add, git commit, git push, and pushing things up to your repository. This week, a lot of you have been putting things into GitHub Pages by using a branch called GH Pages that we went through last week. This is my preferred way of putting things on GitHub Pages. One of the things, though, that I didn't stress enough last week is that the proper way of doing this really is still to work in the master branch and then push things to GitHub Pages right when you're all done. I see a lot of people actually using GitHub Pages as their working branch. And this is generally bad practice because that working branch is always going to be live on the website on GitHub Pages. So this kind of sets you up for something when you're doing a larger project with multiple people on it, where you'll have a master branch that pushes automatically to your website, and you'll work in feature branches. And so what a feature branch is a branch that you're using just to develop a single piece of the application. So if I am writing my resume website along with two of my friends, and we're doing a group resume or something, and I'm working on the little bitty feature for email me, the email me button, then I'd break off a new branch called email. I'd work on that, and then I'd push it back into the main branch. And the reason for doing this is that when you're working on something, you very often break things. And the idea behind having feature branches and a main branch that you push up to is that when you break things in your feature branch, it doesn't matter. Nobody else is looking at that. But your main branch, in many cases, is being automatically pushed to your website. We won't talk about it really in this course, but there's a concept called continuous integration, where you actually have a script that often pushes your main branch up to the website automatically. So whatever is in that main branch just has to work every time you check something in. And so that's kind of where some of this discussion of feature branches and sub-branches pushing up to a main branch comes from. Again, that's not going to form a huge part of this course, but when we start to work together in groups like we will for Project 2, I'd like you to start using your own branches for each of your individual pieces of the project, and then push them back up to this main branch. And there are a couple of ways that you can do that. The first way is by what's called a merge. So here, that's what I just said, tutorial on merge. The other is what's called a pull request. So a merge basically is just saying, take my feature branch and move my feature branch into the main branch. A merge is almost always up. And maybe let me make sure people understand what I mean by up. This is kind of something I've talked about in directory structures as well, that off of master, I've got GH pages. You can see my horrible handwriting. And that email branch that I was talking about. All of these are sub-branches. And so I think of these as being down off of master. And when I work on one of these and I get ready to put my email feature up into master, then I'm pushing up into to master and doing a merge. And so what a merge is saying is take every file that has changed in this email sub-branch and merge it with every file that is in this master branch. And this can happen really easily. It can happen really difficultly. If in the easy way, on this email branch, before you merge, you'll say pull. So you'll get all of the things from master and pull them down to this branch, except for the few that you've worked on and overwritten. So you always want to get the latest master, and then you do your merge, and things should merge cleanly. Because it's only the files that you have edited, and you're the most recent edit, that will be pushed back up into master. Now, if on the other hand, you pull down from email and somebody else in your project group pulls down to their branch and they do a lot of work and they push this back up to master and all of your files are different than the version you have in email and you try and push to master, you'll have to resolve what's called a merge conflict. Ideally, you don't want to go there. This is one of the reasons that when you're building websites, you very often break the pieces of those websites out into their own individual HTML files and CSS files. Is the more you have your website broken up into small files, the less likely you are to conflict with somebody else that's working on that website with you. Because one of your strategies is to say, okay, I'll take these two HTML pages and this CSS and I'll work on it for a while, and then you'll push back. And as long as you're in different files, the merge is very, very easy. If you start to work in the same file, you will at some point have to resolve a merge conflict, which is basically where it pops up the text of that file and says, okay, I've got these changes from these places, tell me which one I should keep. And at that point, you'll have to copy it and make the file look like it should. So merges can get complicated, and it's actually not the way that I tend to work on large projects. It's something you should know is there because it is one of the ways that as you work as a group, you can do so certainly. But I tend to use pull requests instead. And the way that you work in a group using pull requests in GitHub is to designate someone the owner of master, that they're the person who's going to maintain the master branch. And then when you're working on a feature branch, you will submit a pull request that says to the person that's owning the master branch, I want these changes to come into the master branch now. Can you look at them and accept them? And then that person that's accepting that pull request will be the one that looks at the state of master, looks at the changes you've made, goes, yep, I want those changes in, I accept the pull request, and they get merged automatically in there. Or they will go, oh, two people submitted a pull request at once, I better reconcile these. One person turned variable A to 5, one person turned variable A to 7, which should it be, guys? And then you have a discussion and work it out, and then you solve it and then merge it. So this idea of branches merging is basically the way that people make GitHub work for multiple person projects. And it all kind of rides off of that same git add, git commit, git push loop that we've been working on so far through the class, just with the additional complication that multiple people on your team are doing so at the same time. I don't expect this to sink in immediately. People are still struggling with GitHub just on their own. But I want you to read the pages on pull requests here and on merge, this merge tutorial on Atlassian. And just start thinking about those concepts because as we work in groups, I've talked about having a good commit history, being a part of some of the homeworks coming up. And so far, I haven't actually been putting it in the grading scheme for these homeworks yet. But as we come into the projects, it certainly does form part of the grading scheme that you're using GitHub properly. And that really means that working as a group, you use either merges or pull requests and sub-branches. And in Git, you can actually see the tree of the branches that gets generated to kind of identify who's working on what pieces and when they're merging. So they're important concepts to grasp. They are going to be essential to working effectively in project groups. Introducing them now just so you can have a chance to start reading those pages on them, and we'll go through the actual commands in a terminal here probably, if not next class, then the following class after that. Questions about merge and pull requests? Have I glazed everybody over already? Right after saying we wouldn't work in JavaScript and code today? Sorry. Okay, now we'll get on to fun parts then. So I really like looking at websites out there and just kind of seeing how they made them. I've tried for years to be a gamer and absolutely fail at it. I look at a game and think, wow, how'd they get that graphics technique? And then I dig into how they get that, and then I get horribly bored. I kind of like tearing games apart the same way I like tearing websites apart. Once I understand how they're doing it, the game's not fun anymore, and sometimes even the website's not fun anymore. But understanding what's under the covers and making a site run is really cool. So I found this plugin, this What's Runs plugin, and oh God, it is going to bring my horrible pages all up again. Hide, hide, hide tabs, run away. Everything's slow because I'm streaming, of course. So this What's Runs plugin, I'd encourage you on your own sites to go ahead and pull this up and look at things as well. It's a really fun plugin to play with. And what it lets me do is puts a little button up on my taskbar here, and if I click that on a site, it will pop open a page here that tells me what's powering that site. So by powering, I mean things like analytics. Google Analytics is something we'll talk about just very briefly later today in class. It's a way of tracking who's clicking on your website and what they're doing on your website, how long they're staying, that kind of thing. In terms of the framework, Twitter Bootstrap, well, we all know what that is. We've used that in homework already. That's how What Runs is doing the styling on its page. We've talked about Cloudflare as a CDN or content delivery network. That was way back in the first class where we talked about how anybody in the world can then hit a local copy from a CDN and get it to load up very quickly. DevTools, HTML5 Shiv, I've never actually used that one. I don't know what to say about it. jQuery, we know what that is. That was powering Bootstrap, and so they probably pulled it in because they were using Bootstrap. Respond.js is another library. Font Awesome and Google Fonts. So the font that sits on your website is an important part of the design of your website. And some people just kind of go crazy into font geekery. My boyfriend's one of them. He can look at a font and immediately know what it is and makes fun of all my font choices. But some people get so into fonts. I am not so much of a font geek, but Font Awesome is one that I am into just because it goes beyond fonts to also being glyphs or icons. So this is an example of an icon. We have down here that little side button as a glyph. Basically, things that appear on the side of text. They actually don't use very many glyphs. Okay. Well, so much for that. Font Awesome, anyways, has a library of a couple hundred of these icons and glyphs that you can use for populating your website without having to design them all yourself. And the advantage of using from a package like Font Awesome is that they standardize things. So if you have a file folder for a disk, a directory, it'll always look like a file folder regardless of where you are on your site. Everybody will recognize it as such. So using libraries of icons and glyphs is a really important thing to do. And in this case, they come as fonts, which is nice because rather than loading up a heavy graphic, fonts are scalable. So they're what are called vector graphics. And a vector graphic is something that contains the instructions of how to draw that graphic as compared to being a series of pixels. And so if I expand it to take up half the page, it's still not going to take any more space than to download than with the small icon version of that glyph. So anyways, fonts are great for a number of reasons in there. We talked about web servers the first day. Nginx is one of the two major web servers. We had Nginx as the one I actually prefer in there, and then Apache is the other one that is the most common one out there. I don't know what SmartLook is. I don't know what Drift is, and then we have a couple more fonts in here. So what runs is a really neat way of looking under the covers of a website and seeing what technologies they're using to bring that website together. Yeah, hopefully by the time we get to the end of this course, most of the websites you go to, when you pull open a What's Runs list, you'll at least have some idea of what those technologies are, even if you don't know the specific example of it, just as an example of how websites are being built. Questions about what runs? Anybody here think What's Runs as cool as I do? I do? No? Okay. It's cool. I like What's Runs. So last term, I had a fellow come in that does search engine optimization for a living, and we went through a fairly detailed discussion of search engine optimization. And it was an interesting exercise. I enjoyed doing it. I de-emphasized it a little bit this time through the course, just because we needed more time on the JavaScript, and we needed more time on GitHub, and we needed to get people up to the point where they could be productively writing websites. And we spent enough time on the business aspects early in the course last term that we didn't get that time on the technical aspects. So I've shifted things around a little bit this time and don't have the same emphasis on SEO as I previously did, but it's still a really important topic. And it's an important topic to think about very early when designing your website rather than very late. It used to be that finding customers was really, really easy. At the time when everything was brick and mortar, you found your customers by putting up a store, filling the shelves with items you wanted to sell, and if they sold, great, you order more of them. If they didn't sell, eventually you ship them off to some discounter, and your customers are walking in your front door because they're in your neighborhood. On the web, of course, your neighborhood's global, and so finding customers is really not easy anymore. Finding customers is really all about making sure that when they're looking for something, that you're the face in front of them. And you can do that either by making sure that you're coming up in the Google search results and they find you directly, or through sales. And nobody wants to be this guy. I don't want to be this guy. I had a job selling Cutco knives right after university, where I went around and flogged my not door to door, but knife sales. And so you start with a small group of friends and family, and make them refer you to another group of people you don't know. And I eventually found myself in the living room of this 82-year-old woman on a fixed income that plainly just agreed to let me try and sell her knives because she wanted someone to talk to. And she said she wanted to buy $800 worth of knives, and I had to quit and wouldn't sell her the knives. And so that was the end of my sales career. Don't be that guy. That guy sucks. But the only alternative to being that guy is to pre-qualify your customers. And as soon as you go out beyond your network, beyond the people you know want to talk to you and want to buy your product, the only way you pre-qualify them is by letting them pre-qualify themselves. And the best way of doing that really is by, well, I got off on my topic a little bit here. Outbound sales, cold calling sucks. This isn't fun. Paid ads are kind of outbound, but paid ads are in this intermediate category. Paid ads at least have some characteristic of your user that you're targeting on, and so you somewhat pre-qualified them. The best way to pre-qualify them, though, is when they're actually looking for something, and you know what they're looking for, and you know you can provide what they're looking for. And so this is the inbound side of things. When your customers find you, they do the work. And for some reason, when you know that the Joe Schmo needs a set of knives because he's typed in, how do I get a set of good cooking knives into Google, it doesn't feel nearly as slimy to sell him $800 worth of overpriced knives. They're not that overpriced. I actually still have my Cutco knives. It was a good product. It was just a poorly qualified sale I was trying to make. So there's a book that's getting a little bit dated on this, but it's still a reference I like talking about, called The Long Tail. Chris Anderson was an editor of Wired magazine for a long time. He's now on a drone building kick and is big in the world of drones. But in between those two gigs, he wrote a book called The Long Tail. And basically what the long tail's thesis is that when that store I was talking about, the brick and mortar store that you wander in, and if the thing you want is on the shelves, you buy it, and if not, you walk away. Well, if it's not on the shelves, you must not need it because there's nowhere to go other than this little town store. The long tail is basically going, we're all different. We all have different desires. We all have different things we're shopping for. And my desire to buy I don't know, an electronic component to plug into my new phone that does X and Y little geeky thing that nobody else here in this room cares about. Is something that I'm going to search for using my own search terms, and is the absolute epitome of the long tail. None of you in 100 years would probably search for that exact item. And if we were all dependent on our local hardware store for what we wanted to buy, none of us would ever get those things. All of our consumerist desires are to some extent unique. And so if we look at keywords with this idea of the long tail, this is going to have various impacts. So first impact is that the things that are closer towards the red side here are things lots and lots of people are going to be searching for. So in some sense, they're poorly qualified customers in that you only know that someone is vaguely interested in tea. If somebody's searching for loose leaf tea, this cuts the size of people that are searching for that down a lot. If they're searching for loose leaf tea in New York City, cuts it down even more. Well, loose leaf tea in Victoria, you might actually only get one or two places in Victoria that actually satisfy that need. So this is the idea of the long tail. And it comes into developing a strategy for your website in a number of ways. The first is that in this inbound search engine optimization way, it's very easy to own a niche of a very, very small market on the long end of the tail. If there are only 2 or 3 stores in Victoria selling loose leaf tea, and you're one of them, you're most likely going to appear either right at the top or very close to the top of the Google search results for loose leaf tea Victoria. It is also the case that if you're talking about paid ads, that the cost per click on paid ads is proportional to the number of people that are meeting that term or meeting the bucket that you're trying to pay for. So if I were to put a Facebook ad up for tea, that I want everybody who mentions an interest in tea to see my ad, I might be paying a couple of dollars per click. And from a revenue perspective on a website, there's no way that's going to pay it back for you. The ROI of tea is pretty much a non-starter. But if I'm making a Facebook ad for loose leaf tea Victoria, it's going to be a very cheap cost per click because nobody else is really bidding for that. And the way that you get these ads is essentially by bidding for them. So if you're up against I don't know, David's Tea nationally, they're going to be able to pay more than you are for your little mom and pop tea shop here in Victoria. So reaching that long tail, being at the end of a very, very specific query is very important for making your site visible through this inbound marketing approaches. It's also useful, of course, for containing the cost for your advertising program. But finally, it's very useful in defining your customer. And all of this stuff to me comes back down to website design. And the more you can define your customer, the more effective you're going to be at satisfying the needs of your customer. Now, this may not be a pure financial transaction. Now, you may not be trying to build the website for selling loose leaf tea in Victoria. You may be trying to build the website. Well, we had Can Assist, a disability support group, come in last term and propose some projects for people to build websites to help disabled people find their first job. So putting up pages on how to dress for work, how to get to work, how to interview, what do you do on your first day of your job. And so in that kind of project, you're obviously not making money off these people directly, but they're still your customer, they're still your client. And the more precisely you can define who your website is for, the better it is that you're going to be able to make a website to meet their needs, whether or not it's a paid customer financial transaction. And when we are talking about global marketplace kind of transactions, this long tail concept and what people are searching for is one of the first ways that you define who your customer is. So this comes down to a number of things on how we actually make a website that Google will rank first in the rankings. I gave the example of the long tail and loose leaf tea Victoria because that forms one element of a search engine optimization strategy. But it is only one element. When it comes down to it, one of the reasons for following a search engine optimization strategy is that Google knows what users like out there. Google knows a lot. They know a frightening amount, actually. If we get time today, and we may not, it's a packed lecture, I'll go show up some things on Google Analytics and what they know about people on some of my websites. But they know the demographics of my visitor. They know whether they're male or female. They know what website they've come from. They know how old they are. If I pay them a bit extra, they know in a lot of cases the income bracket that they fall into. They know a lot of their interests. There's just a whole lot of things that Google knows. And about your website, they know how long your users are staying on that website, how long they sit on each page. There's this concept called a bounce, when somebody navigates onto a page and within a second or two navigates back away, hits the back button. And a bounce is basically a bad signal. It means they're in the wrong place, that they thought they wanted to go there and then decided, oh, no, I don't want to be here. They bounce back out. And so all of these things form metrics about how satisfied your users are with your website. And those metrics go back up to Google one way or another. And they help influence the rankings that your website have in search. And basically, the happier your users are, the higher your rankings will be in search eventually. Now, I say eventually because it takes a long time to stabilize on that. When you launch a new website, you have no user history, and so you're just kind of wherever on the list you land. But as you get more and more users and Google gets these kind of background indicators of how happy your users are, that will help push you up in those rankings. And so it's very useful to use the factors that push you up in the Google rankings, what Google infers that your users want out of your website, as a way of actually designing your website. Because if you, from the front end, think about, I'm going to use the factors that Google cares about and use that as a proxy for what my users care about, then you're one step ahead on actually showing up high on the search rankings, and hopefully one step ahead in actually building the type of website that your user wants to interact with and use. There's an interesting table that is on this site called Search Engine Land, SEO table. And so I'm going to pull it up here on the next slide. And I'd encourage you to go up to the site and look at this, because this is actually too grainy to see anything of. So let me go to the site and look at this. Come on. No, I want the actual one. No, I don't want to do it that way. Sigh. Go away. This is actually a reasonable site, even if it appears a little bit spammy in what it's asking for and everything. I just want a large form that I can read the things on. No, you already have my email. Okay, maybe we will just... Crap. Okay, you do get my email. One of my emails. Sorry, you get to see me all poke through my email to find the page that I should have downloaded previously. Okay, great. They've also changed it just slightly since I copied this page down before, but looks like most of the pieces are still there. Good. So I'm going to be asking you guys to use this in a couple of different ways, and so I will actually save this and post it up on the Slack so that nobody else has to give their email address to SEO land. But basically, the factors for search engine optimization consist of on-the-page factors and off-the-page factors. On-the-page factors are those things that are on your HTML page, things that you have direct control over. So this is things like the quality of the page. Are they well written? There are some automated metrics for determining that. Have you researched the keywords that people use to get to that page? Are those keywords on the page? What words are you using? Are you using words and phrases that people use when looking for this stuff? How often is your content refreshed? So if it's a page from 2002 and you've not touched it since then, it fails on the freshness criteria. All of these things are about the content itself. How vertical, how thin is it, shallow, lacking content. These are all bits about the page. But then there are things about the architecture of the page. Can a website crawl a page? So crawling is a process where Google, in doing its search engine, will go find all the HTML pages on your site and collect all the terms out of those pages. And you use a file called robots.txt to make sure that they can find all the content they're looking for. Excuse me. Does your site work well on mobile devices? We talked about this last week about writing responsive websites that can be shown either on big screens or small screens. All of these are things that affect your search engine rankings. Does the site load quickly? This is one that when I was talking about the glyphs and fonts being really nice in here is an important consideration. Because if you're loading a 2 megapixel bitmap image and somebody on a browser on a slow connection takes 10 seconds to load that up, that's going to torch all your search engine optimization rankings because it fails on this the speed of loading criteria. Do your URLs contain the keywords, or are you naming something with a random string of letters.html? This is going to fall much more low on search rankings than is something called looseleaf t victoria.html, if we're looking for that looseleaf t site. And then are you structuring your HTML properly? We've only barely touched on this, but when you're writing HTML, you want to make a careful use of things like titles, things like headings. So we have those H1, H2, H3, H4, H5. These are for different levels of headings. And the way you set up your titles and your headings on your page actually matters because this is actually crawled by the search engines in order to see if your page has an actual structure that users are interested in and used to. And of course, it matters to your users as well, because if you're breaking up the information in such a way that they can navigate it, this is actually a whole field of psychology called information architecture that is, I guess actually it's as much library science as it is psych these days. But how you present information to people is incredibly important as to how they understand it, and never more so than on the web where there's just an absolute wealth of information. So that's a whole bunch of the on-the-page factors. Off-the-page factors are equally important, but much harder for you to control. The off-the-page factors are much more things about who's linking to you and how they're linking to you and how people rate your page. And so it's stuff that develops in the ecosystem, develops organically, but from the get-go, there's not as much you can do with it. And so we're going to just barely look at some of these engagement history. Has your site been around a long time? Have you been flagged for piracy? Are you getting linked into from high-quality sites? At least in the first part, there's very little you can do about this. Some of the personal stuff, though, is interesting in this respect. If I have a site that ranks very high for loose leaf tea Victoria, but I actually mean Victoria, Australia, and somebody's coming in from Canada. I'm going to fall way down low in those rankings. If I have somebody coming in from Australia and I have loose leaf tea Victoria and the Victoria that's in Australia, I'm going to fall very high in those rankings. So the locality and the personal search history of the person doing the browsing, doing the Google searching, ranks very, very highly in these measures. You may also notice that when you search for something and the person sitting next to you searches for something, that you get very, very different results. And this is because your search history is also something that weighs in on search rankings. So there's actually some ways of seeing the raw search rankings without the personal aspects tied to it. And when you're building a site, that's a useful way of seeing if you're matching the keywords is by going and looking at it not associated with the current logged in Google profile. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say about the off-the-page factors. So let me post this to the Slack presently, actually, so that you have a big version. Because the next thing we're going to do is a bit of an exercise to use the search engine optimization success factors table in evaluating the uvic.ca portion of a website. And I want to know a few things they do wrong and a few things that they do right. And so let me post this so y'all can get it. And I'm also going to, while I'm at it, post a business model canvas because we'll be using it for a exercise in a few minutes here. Okay, so hit up Slack, pull down a SEO periodic table of success factors, and find me 3 good points and 3 bad points about the UVic website using the SEO success factors. And in about 5 minutes here, let's get back together and compare some notes about what UVic does wrong and does right. Ready to pick apart UVic's website? So what I'd like to do with this is have folks suggest something that could be changed and what success factor is basing that. This is something also that use this as a bit of practice for giving feedback on websites. In that as we get further along in this class and we focus more and more on the design aspects of websites, giving critical feedback is a very important skill. And the more database that feedback can be, the more well-received that feedback will be. And so if one of your classmates makes the worst shit show of a website ever, and you think there's horrible things wrong with it, and you just hate it, saying this is crap, I hate it, is not good critical feedback. Saying this probably fails on CQ quality, the writing could be improved, and the words you use, factor CW, it can be improved, and giving very specific database feedback gives actionable items that don't just feel like opinions that are kind of personally taken. It is something, though, that in any design field, you've got to learn to kill your babies. And this is a phrase that we use to design in Microsoft, that when you work on something and you've put hours into this thing, it's something you feel very personally invested in. And when somebody comes up and says, this is crap, it's like, oh, no, you're insulting me, not the thing I've just built. But sometimes it is, and you get so close to something that you can't see that pieces of it need to be lopped off. So kill your babies is kind of the semi-offensive term for that. But giving and receiving feedback on design things, the more it's data-based, the more effective it is. So let's find a data-based criticism of the UVic website. Somebody have one? Come on, it's not that good a website. Okay, great. So if I were to cast that in the SEO table of success factors, where is that? That would be an AM, mobile. Does your site work well on all devices? And so if I look over here, that's actually one of the most important ones. This +3 means that this is ranked more highly than something that's a +2 or a +1. So it doesn't work well on my phone is a great criticism of the website. Who else has got one? Okay.
I was found that there was a lot of directories that lead to the same page, and that page.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a horrible failing in the UVic website. Let's find what that guy hits. So it's not the HTML side. It's probably well, it's kind of duplicate content, but it's not really. It's more duplicate links, isn't it? Maybe that falls off of a off the page.
I felt like you were never hitting the back button, but you went forward to the different pages of the site. At some point, a link that you've already been to was like, shit, I'm apparently going to, and you've already been on that site, and you know that was
Yeah, it tends to loop. I've totally found that. I'm not sure I mapped that easily to one of the success factors, though. The HTML is all on the page. It'd have to be something under architecture because that talks about how the site itself is structured. Yeah, I don't actually find one that would apply to the the SEO factors very well. It may be link quality, but that'd just come back to how UVic ranks as a link provider, and that'd be the same across the institution, so it wouldn't get much of a hit from that. So as objectionable as that is, and I absolutely agree with you, I don't think it falls under an SEO success factor. Who else has got one? Okay, or one that's good about the UVic site, success factor that leads it to it being effective. Nobody? Okay. So one of the things it does do well is this freshness of content. They do update things on their front page very often. Now, it's not things I generally care about, but at least they're updating. So in terms of the freshness, this CF is only a +2, so it's kind of the middle of how it's weighted. But it is a good thing to have things like these marquee bars that keep up-to-date, fresh content on there all the time. I would probably mark the UVic site down on the speed of load. I find that it's a fairly slow site overall, and this is because the site's loading a lot of images up front. And so sometimes you have success factors that weigh against each other. They're putting new things up on their front page a whole lot, and that little marquee of images rolls around a lot, but those images are very heavyweight. So if we look at these two, that freshness is a +2 and the speed is a +2. Well, I'm fresh, but it's with big heavy images that have to be loaded each time. That's a minus, and maybe they just balance each other out. So look at both the pluses and the minuses on here as you're thinking about your site and how to set it up. Anybody else think of one? Okay. Well, one of the parts of the homework this week is going to be to analyze a website by the SEO success factors and give me more on paper than you gave me in person. Let's take about 5 minutes to take a break and come back at about 7 o'clock and launch into the next section in here. Thanks. Yeah, that's what it is. If you want to walk away, then it's got a little checkbox that says you can walk in for 8 hours.
Yeah.
Would you also do that? So there are a lot of things that you can think of as good or bad features in one website performance. And I suspect that this is one that is not good. It's something that's good or bad. So either way, I mean, you do an analysis of the website. So feel free to but those ones that are I don't use them as yeah, well, it's not a busy but they're less under your control. So who links to your page is something that like your buying ads. You don't have much control over where somebody is coming from. And so it's totally yeah. Yep, no, that's true. That's true. Well, no, the size of the book. It's not written in Yeah, no, focus more on plus the plus three.
Yeah.
No, so always looking at that search engine, it walks through your site, kind of all the pages. And so the pages can be done pretty much in that, site. It's one of all your things that's, so that's one that's listed as an on-page traffic, but it's really something we don't make. If you just have your if you have multiple pages, that's right. colder out there or warmer out there? Is it? It's cold in here. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I don't know if I have control of that. Is there a little slidey thing right there? No, I didn't think that they pressing this enough to this control room. Right. All right. Shall we talk more about advertising? Cool. So one of the most important is Google AdWords. AdWords are sorry, I forgot my throat. AdWords are a pay-per-click ad strategy, meaning that just to show something doesn't cost you any money, but as soon as somebody clicks on it, it does cost you money. This is something that is you've got to calculate for all of the paid ads what the value of a click is to you. If the value of a click is very small, then you can't compete in the major AdWord categories. So basically, AdWord ads are going to cost anywhere from a fraction of a penny a click to, in some cases, 10, 15 bucks a click. And those 10, 15 buck a click AdWords are either going to be ones that are very, very popular that big corporates are bidding with you on, or that are so, excuse me, so specific in. Sorry. Or so specific in a large, expensive category that there's going to be someone big bidding against you. So, for instance, I don't know, I'm making something up here, but a new Model 1A Abrams tank, you might have a tank manufacturer that owns that market. That if any general, and you know that from who they are and their Google history, is searching for it, you'll pop up to the top. Hotly contested. They'd be willing to pay lots and lots and lots for a click on that for somebody that was qualified sufficiently. By the same token, tea, without all the qualifiers we talked about in the long tail, is something that David's Tea and Starbucks and some of the major kind of drink manufacturers will be willing to bid up very highly, and that might come to. I don't have any idea. Let's maybe actually, while this video discussing AdWords is going, I will try and figure out what the AdWords T cost per click is right now, because I'm curious.
Hi guys, Gary Bruni from the Business Growth Guys, and today I got my Joker t-shirt on, and you know, I just happen to like comic books and stuff, but today's video is no joke. We're going to talk about AdWords. AdWords is Google's pay-per-click advertising and pay-per-view advertising system. AdWords is getting increasingly more complicated over the years, and we'll go through some of that. And you get to this site by typing in adwords.google.com, and you'll have to log in with an approved account. You should make this the same account as your analytics and your search console account. So should all be the same account, which allows you universal login across all of their tools, and all of your accounts should be connected. So what do I mean by pay-per-click? Well, Google will show your ad in search results to as many people as possible, so that somebody clicks on it and Google gets to take money out of your bank account. So yes, you pay them. So I'll just click on Business Growth Guy here, and I'll click on ads, and you can see that I've got 4 ads set up here. These ads are just like writing a classified ad that would have gone in the newspaper at the back. It's very short, to the point. You don't have a lot of characters to work with. If I click edit here, you'll see that there's 6 characters left in the title, 13 left there, 12 left there. If I click to create a new text ad, and I take this out, you've got 25 characters in your headline and 35 characters in each of your descriptions. So you've got 25 character headline and you've got 70 characters of description to work with. That's all you have. That's why I refer to them as classified ads. You need to be short and sweet. And if you can, fit a call to action in there. Make them interesting. Don't copy your competitors. There's a good tip for you. Keywords. These are the keywords that I would want the ads to come up on. When you put in the keywords, Google will also tell you what you need to pay to show up on the first page. That's what a click might cost you. So a click on business development strategy may cost me around $9. That's a pretty expensive click. That's why I said they'll take the money out of your bank account and they'll suck up your budget as quickly as possible. Now, I'm going to go back up a level here for a second. And I'm going to answer one other question in this short video. There are different networks that you can display your ads on. You can use just the search network. So that means Google search page and any of their search partners, or you can include display, which will show up on any website that has AdSense installed, which is Google's program for allowing website owners to put Google ads on their site and get paid if somebody clicks on the ad. And of course, these days they own YouTube, and if you've been on YouTube, you've seen the ads that run beforehand. There's also ads down the side. You can advertise in that space as well. So the campaign type allows you to choose which network you're advertising on, and then you can choose whether you're doing mobile, call only. There's a bunch of other features. Like I said, this is getting a little complicated as Google enhances everything. So this is just a brief, quick introduction into what Google AdWords is.
And I was not fast enough in finding the cost of tea to be able to answer that question. Everybody get the idea that...
Hi, welcome to the exciting AdWords Essentials training course.
Go away. Everybody get that AdSense is things that play on your site. AdWords is things that lead to your site from clicks. Google AdWords makes sense? Yeah. Okay. I don't like AdWords much, actually. They are something that's fairly expensive, and you have fairly little control. And as soon as an area gets hot, they get very, very hard to manage your budget on. You can set a maximum budget with Google and not go above that, but you're basically going to be at the mercy of Google and other people bidding on that that ad as to what your results are going to be. I don't find that AdWords are as effective as we'll get to this in a few minutes. Some other means of social media-based advertising for your site. But certainly, if you've got money for an advertising budget, it's one of the two major ways to go out there right now. The other has a bunch of equal problems, but that's Facebook ads. So, of course, this is where Facebook makes most of its money, is on selling advertising and promoted content that's in there. And it's changed a lot over the years. It started to be started to be very, very specific around 2010, and there's a really neat story that I kind of now wish I hadn't cut out of this version of the slides because it was just a whole lot of fun. So let me actually tell it, even though it was not in there. This fellow Brian writes a blog called Ghost Influence, and he's kind of backed off a little bit since then. But early days of Facebook ads, he was playing with the ad campaigns and how specific you can make them. and he had a new roommate, and decided he was going to prank his new roommate. They'd had a variety of prank contests, and his new roommate was a sword swallower, and so he had a weird hobby, and with the way you do Facebook ads, you set the specificity of the ad by a number of factors that Facebook knows about. And Facebook knows about different things than Google knows about. So it knows not only your age and location and what kind of hobbies you have, but what kind of things you're making posts about. And these all kind of find their way into the Facebook ad targeting equation. So it's kind of creepy when you think about it, actually, that the things that are being shown to you are a direct result of things that you've been posting privately about on your wall or sending messages to people about. Google at least doesn't descend quite into those levels of creepiness, in that it does not anymore use email content for ad targeting in Google. They worked for a while, but it got enough pushback that they've stopped doing that now. But Facebook still jumps whole hog onto to this. So they know stuff that you've been posting. They know, of course, where you are and everything else. And so Brian I had this new roommate move in with them, and they started having this prank contest. And he found that to narrow the specificity of the Facebook ads, that he was able to make ads show up only to a particular zip code, his, only to people of a particular demographic, meaning white males between the age of 32 and 33 years old at that point. Only making a certain amount of money, and had managed to make that specific to his roommate. Eventually, anyways, he got the specificity category down so that one person fit in it, his roommate. And then started playing with the ads that showed up to his roommate. First it was ads on sword swallowing, and he just thought, what's the best sword for sword swallowing? Click here for sword swallowing tips. Then it started to get a little bit creepier. Even though he's a sword swallower, apparently he had a hard time swallowing pills, so can swallow swords but not pills. Click here for a free guide. And so his roommate started thinking, my God, Facebook is just so creepy. I got to turn off Facebook. Anyways, it proceeded on and on from here until he eventually targeted an ad that referenced something that had only been said to him in a conversation by his roommate. His roommate then freaked out about, well, are they listening to the microphone now? And was about to go see a psychiatrist when he fessed up and said, no, actually, I've been pranking you. Just a glorious story. Yeah, the blog Ghost Influence has a really fun account of it, way neater than my little summary. But Facebook ads can no longer be as specific as that. Maybe it was Brian's influence. They've now got a setting so you have to have at least 10 people in the specific category that you're targeting. So you can't prank your roommate anymore, but you might be able to prank your dorm still. The kind of neat thing about Facebook ads in that respect is that, of course, it is based on a pay-per-click model. So when it only had Brian's roommate in the specificity category there, only his roommate was clicking, and even if that click cost 50 cents, well, it's a 50-cent ad campaign. So if you are doing a product that is very locally based, let's come back to Victoria Loose Leaf Tea, and you want to make it so that only people that are able to qualify for that product are getting your ads. You can run a fairly cheap ad campaign on Facebook. You just have to be very, very careful about how you set up the specifics of that ad campaign. Now, there have been some complaints about Facebook ad campaigns, and that there are some concerns about all the clicks not being real clicks, about some ghost clicks being in there. There are some ad companies that have gotten kind of dirty and have some plugins into both Facebook and Google, in fact, at this point have had some scandals there as well. to run out the ad budget of your competitors by falsely clicking on your ads. There's some kind of shady stuff to be worried around paid ads there. But it's a useful form of marketing and certainly a way of initially driving traffic to your site. And that's the first problem on any website is getting people there in the first place. And I mean, of course, you can go off the internet ads. And if you're starting the next Uber, maybe you do need to do radio and television ads and newspapers and all that kind of jazz, billboards. But that's super expensive. And presuming you're not running the kind of budget that would have you go off the internet for your marketing campaign, on the internet, you've got to find some way of getting it in front of people. And Google ads and Facebook ads are one of the first ones to do that. I cut out the other slide I wanted to think about in here, though, and shouldn't have. Social media is not really an ad vehicle, although there are elements of ads on there. I mean, things like Reddit, things like Twitter, all of these are able to be used for ad campaigns, but are not necessarily traditional advertising. So Reddit you can buy ads on, of course, just kind of like Facebook ads or Google ads, but there's also a very active kind of viral marketing campaigns that go on Reddit, where you just kind of mention your website in the appropriate forums and start getting people to try and pick up on it. And in fact, at this point, that type of a viral marketing campaign is absolutely as effective as a normal advertising campaign. And in part is due to the fact that we tend to give more credence to opinions of people that we have social interactions with than we do things that we know are ads. And so just plugging your website in the appropriate forums of people who might be interested in that website is a very valid way of getting that initial traffic to your website. And that initial traffic is the hardest one to get because when you start getting popular, people will start coming to your website on their own and searching for your website. But that initial getting people to know about it is absolutely the hardest part. One of the things that is absolutely critical to that, though, is there's a company in Vancouver called Hootsuite. Hootsuite is got a platform that specializes in being able to post the same announcements on multiple social media sites. And so if you want to do your ad campaign and get it to Facebook and Twitter and Reddit, and they have 3 or 4 others on there now, you can just write it once and then get it sent out to all those sites. And although Hootsuite's making a lot of money and they're making a lot of waves in the area, I have a lot of skepticism about this approach in that each of the different social media sites has a different and kind of characteristic ways of talking to each other. And so an ad written for Twitter in 140 characters, it's just not going to play very well on Reddit where you have a longer paragraph style format. An ad written for Reddit in kind of this casual tone that most of the forums have is probably not going to play very well on LinkedIn. Which has a much more business formal tone to it. And so each of the social media sites that you might want to sell your product on or get people driven to your website from has a very different tone and feel. And so it's much better to write specifically for whatever location it is you're trying to get notice from than these aggregator sites like Hootsuite. I'm going to leave marketing both inbound and outbound at that, unless people have marketing questions. Okay. Hopefully there are much better marketers in this room than I am, and all you need to do is get some websites built out there and take advantage of that. It's an area that's really important for getting your websites noticed, but it's never been my favorite part of web development. I mostly think of the marketing aspects as ways of driving my design development for websites. And it is an important way of learning about your users and knowing about your users. An equally important way is this idea of lean launchpad I'm going to get into now. I had a introductory video, had or still have. Well, I've got that short one on Biz Model Canvas, but I don't really on Lean Launchpad anymore. I had an introductory video on Lean Launchpad in here that I might throw up on the Slack channel because it was an interesting one. Steve Blank has been going and teaching classes in entrepreneurship for probably pushing 15 years now, I think. And he teaches a class at Stanford that has a format that really influenced my construction of this class the first couple times around. Now, I shifted off this model some, but just because we didn't have time to do it justice. But the Lean Launchpad methodology consists of defining a product space that you're looking at, and he then has a tagline of "Get out of the building." And so you build this minimum viable product, and sometimes that minimum viable product is just a picture on a piece of paper, and then you go out and ask your users about it. You ask your users about it, iterate on it, bring it back in, iterate on your prototype, make it a little bit better, and get out and talk to your users again. And so this iterative process of starting with something that really isn't a product and then talking to your users about it and iterating on it is really the cheapest way to do product development these days. There are a lot longer term ways of doing customer interactions or interacting with your users. The fundamental truth here is that you don't know your users do. Until you spend a lot of time with your users and ask them about what you're building, you've got no idea if it's going to be successful or not. And Lean Launchpad is a fairly cheap, easy way of getting into this ethos of understanding your users. Prior to Lean Launchpad, I had a lot of time spent working on a technique called customer-centered design. In customer-centered design, what we did, I was working on a system administration product at this point, a systems management server at Microsoft, and we were targeting network administrators with our product. And I actually went and spent about 6 months sitting with the network admins one day a week and just writing down what it is that they were doing, what products they were using, what problems they were solving, how they were solving them, and doing this very, very in-depth research and bringing that back and trying to roll that into our systems management server product. And this, in some ways, is the same philosophy of Lean Launchpad, of get out of the building and talk to your users, but on a totally different approach to it, that 6 months of investment of talking to your users before you roll something into a product may be sustainable for a company like Microsoft, but is in no way sustainable for the kind of small, quick, one-off websites that you guys in here are going to be probably thinking about building. And so Lean Launchpad is this idea of talking to your customers in a way that's actionable in this virtuous cycle of continuing to iterate on your product. The other thing that weighs into the Lean Launchpad methodology, though, is a way of categorizing and organizing your thinking about a business. And so the one we're going to be using in here is a technique called the business model canvas. And I think I'm going to give my voice a break, and rather than talking through it, send us back to YouTube to listen to a introduction to the business model canvas.
An organization's business model can be described with 9 basic building blocks: your customer segments, your value proposition for each segment, the channels to reach customers, customer relationships you establish, the revenue streams you generate, the key resources and key activities you require to create value, the key partners, and the cost structure of the business model. But it's not sufficient to just enumerate the 9 building blocks. What you really want to do is to map them out on a pre-structured canvas. This is what we call the business model canvas, a tool that helps you map, discuss, design, and invent new business models. Let's briefly go through the 9 building blocks, starting with the customer segments. These are all the people or organizations for which you're creating value. This includes simple users and paying customers. For each segment, you have a specific value proposition. These are the bundles of products and services that create value for your customers. The channels describe through which touchpoints you're interacting with customers and delivering value. The customer relationships outline the type of relationship you're establishing with your customers. The revenue streams make clear how and through which pricing mechanisms your business model is capturing value. Then you need to describe the infrastructure to create, deliver, and capture value. The key resources show which assets are indispensable in your business model. The key activities show which things you really need to be able to perform well. The key partners show who can help you leverage your business model, since you won't own all key resources yourself, nor will you perform all key activities. Then once you understand your business model's infrastructure, you'll also have an idea of its cost structure. So with the business model canvas, you can map out your entire business model in one image. This works for startup entrepreneurs just as well as for the most senior executives.
So basically a way of categorizing what is the fundamental success factors of your business. See the picture there. I posted this to Slack as well. We're in a minute here going to go through a bit of an exercise and work through some pieces of this. So again, the canvas, we've got the partnerships, the key activities, the value propositions. We'll be talking about a more detailed way of evaluating value propositions in just a little bit here. Customer relationships, customer segments. So basically in any business, you're going to have various categories of customers, and segmenting those into the most detailed form you can is very valuable in trying to target your website or your business in general to those customers. We have a technique in design called design personas, which is very closely related to this customer segmentation. And it's something that I'm going to encourage you guys to use in your projects in trying to think about your customers. We're having to shortcut things in this class a lot, of course. We don't have in the time that we have in this course time to both get to a defined website business, go out and talk to customers on it, and iterate on it. Just too much to ask in this format of a once a week course. And so we're going to be not talking to real users as much as I would be liking to if we were actually launching the things that we were building in here. But in lieu of talking to real users, the way of addressing that is by thinking through your customer segmentation very carefully and creating personas of users. And so as an example, in that network administrator study that I was talking about just a minute ago, one of the end results of that study was to come back and create our user-centered design wall and then think about prioritizing the features that went into the products from there. And on that user-centered design wall were a series of personas. And these personas were not people that I'd actually seen in person. They were syntheses of the people that I'd been interviewing. Because at that point, I probably interviewed 100 people, and trying to think about how to build a product for 100 people is pretty near impossible, 100 different people. But trying to think about how to build a product for half a dozen different people is very valuable. And so we create these synthesis personas and map them out in as much detail as possible. For instance, we had Neil, who was the Exchange server, a mail server, a website admin. I had 2 kids and a dog, lived 45 minutes from work, and didn't carry a cell phone. This was important then, since we were starting to think about the ways of notifications when there was a network event they had to deal with. And so all of these details about this person's life are things that weigh in when you think about how to make your design decisions. And so I'm going to be asking you at some point in here to do a bit of a personas exercise, and we won't do it until we actually get the project ideas nailed for project 2. But to do a personas exercise, thinking about who the actual people are who would be using your product. I'd like to take a minute, and well, actually a few minutes here, and jointly fill out a business model canvas. And let's just do so for a business we all know and love or hate. That's a brick and mortar business, not even a website business. But let's go through the canvas. And again, on the Slack channel, you've got a copy of this. And we've got 9 elements of the canvas here and 8 tables, some of which have only 1. I'm sorry, you guys get to do a section on your own. And just go around and have each of y'all fill out the section of canvas for McDonald's that you land on. And so I'm just going to kind of go around the canvas. So we'll have you guys start with key partners. And second table back, why don't you hit key activities? If you don't mind hitting key resources, we'll go on to value propositions with you guys. Sorry, you also get to do one alone. If you could do customer relationships, and then channels. I guess you guys do channels in there. Actually, why don't you guys do customer segments in there? Sorry? No, these guys in front, you mean? Why don't you do customer segments and you guys do channels, and I'll point you to cost structure of McDonald's, and then I'll do a little bit on revenue streams. Everybody know what they're filling out a business model canvas section on? Did you get that?
No, that'd be bad. Shoes or McDonald's? Oh, yes.
Good routine.
Folks ready to go around and say a few words about your section? I got more looking at screens than resounding yeses. Okay. Let's take just about another minute then to wrap up with having a couple of things to say about each section. Okay. Let's go around and get some thoughts on the section. You guys were on key partners. What do you got to say about key partners at McDonald's?
They become suppliers, so if there's suppliers or what they're factors, over just big ones.
Yep.
They're very like local with a lot of like cultural culture. And then they have like a lot of kind of people coming in and that in there. It's very
Okay. And which of these key partners are kind of essential to the business as compared to being just suppliers that could be exchanged out for another supplier?
the executive.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. It's one of the things that, as we walk through this chart, that's really important on partners is identifying suppliers, which are certainly partners, versus somebody that's just critical. So, for instance, if I was doing a website and set my website on an Oracle database and I invested thousands of dollars into using just that Oracle database, then suddenly Oracle is one of my key partners, and I might regret that the rest of my business life. So key partners are largely those that are not replaceable, not fungible, and it is another way of saying that. But yep, all those are great key partners for McDonald's. You guys were on key activities, is that right? What's McDonald's do as a corporation?
Food prep, selection of ingredients, chef distributors, customer service, management, customer experience, CCC, which is different locations,
Okay.
location planning, like it's all about
Mhm.
location wise, how kids can get there, how purchase for pushing the meals. Deciding exactly what goes into every meal, how
Okay.
it's going to be connected.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. One of the things that I'd encourage thinking about in terms of key activities here is that McDonald's, the corporation, is a step removed from its customers by its franchisees. So franchise relationships are one of the key activities of the corporation itself. So thinking about business structure in terms of this this page is really important. But no, those are great activities. That's all things McDonald's do, certainly. What about resources?
So, I mean, they need food, so vegetable, animal farms, and they need, within specific communities, they need to stock their places, so they need to stock in each community, they gotta build it, so they need to build it and infrastructure from specific communities as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. That's a good list. And you guys run value propositions. What does McDonald's provide to the world or their customers? Okay. Okay, that's certainly one aspect of it. Yeah.
From like a non-vegetarian point of view, it's a pretty like good variety of options for kids as well. They have like play areas, healthy eating, it's super accessible, there's like everywhere, there's daycare, all of it. It's very wide. Like sometimes you don't have to creative
Gotcha. Yeah. So let's see that. Okay, great. Yeah. No, value proposition really, you're right on pushing on the unique value among their competitors. And one of those with McDonald's, of course, is the kids quit screaming when you go to McDonald's. And so it's familiar and fun. And yeah, great. What about customer relationships?
And we like to do that. So compared to like other restaurants, we would like show the person more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And the attract like you mentioned, like providing like some kind of something.
Great. Yeah. No, those are all good things. Going to jump out of this model canvas for a second. As you're working on website businesses as part of this course, think about whose customers the customers are. For instance, if you're selling through Amazon, they're not your customers. They're Amazon's customers, and they own that relationship channel in a very fundamental way. And so customer relationships is a category that when we're talking about the web, often entails not only the customers themselves, but how those customers think about you and how you get to your customers. So customer relationships are really, really critical with websites. What you guys?
We have the customer segments with kids because of Happy Meals, state market toys and stuff like that that are associated with these places. People who don't have a lot of time because it's fast food, lower income families, and the elderly because they have
Yep. That's a great way to segment. So again, back to our projects in class, try and come down to a small handful of segments you can create a persona around. And I can see easily how I could create a name and a history behind each one of those 4 or 5 different people you named, 5 or 6. Yeah. Great. And you guys had channels, is that right? Or do you have segments?
Yeah,
Channels.
For channels, we had you have the drive-through, then you can either kind of go directly into the store or place and sit down and eat. And then they also have the automated tellers now.
Mhm.
So that is kind of a more cost-effective way for McDonald's to deliver that service. Also, their placement of their locations is pretty big. So kind of like on major roads and highways and stuff. So you get a lot of like traffic going by, as well as in food courts and stuff like that.
Yep. Okay. This is an easier one for a brick and mortar because the channels are just where they're sitting. For website businesses, this one actually gets very complex sometimes. And so channels, it comes back again to that. If you're with Amazon, Amazon's one channel, and if it's their customer, you may have to sell there to get your products out there, but keep your own channel as well. And so thinking about these distribution paths to your customer is critical in a lot of website businesses. But yeah, that's a great list for McDonald's. And then you had cost structure.
Very similar to the industry average. They have raw materials or purchases that are the largest component in the labor, so spend 31% of the revenue on purchases, 24.6% on wages, 14% on rent and utility, 3.5% on depreciation, and 3.4% on marketing and other.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Boy, 3% on marketing is pretty big given the billions that flow into McDonald's every year. Yeah, cool. Okay, yeah, so cost structure is, it comes down to both inputs and outputs. When you're thinking about your own kind of smaller scale startup businesses, you'll be able to actually quantify each of the startup expenses and each of the revenue inputs you'd get from a customer. And the idea is kind of to set a 1 year, then a 3 year time frame on some of these, and kind of do your modeling at that point, looking forward using this canvas to think about the growth of your company. We'll just kind of do it in one shot for our project in here, but when you're actually trying to plan a real business on this, keeping a short term or sometimes a short term, medium term, long term time frame, and doing a canvas up for each of these is one way of thinking about the growth of the business. And then I had the last one, the revenue streams. Food's the obvious one. That's where most of their revenue comes from. But again, thinking about this franchise model with McDonald's, they're actually getting as much from real estate and franchise fees in a lot of markets as they are from the food. And they own some of their stores. They have their franchisees own others of the stores. Obviously, if they don't own the store, they don't get the real estate uptake on that, but they instead get franchise fees. Where they own the stores, they're actually really smart about moving them out to areas that might not be as high priced, but still be as accessible, and making use of the real estate transactions in there. They have transportation fees to get things to their franchisees and events in there as well. So a lot of different revenue sources, but food's, of course, the big one for McDonald's in there. So great. I think that's a good run through the categories with a specific example. Anybody have thoughts on the business model canvas and how it might work better, or things that are missing from there? Are there fundamentals of a business that this doesn't capture? Okay. I'm sure as we go through and you think about specific business cases, you'll find things that don't fit cleanly into these categories. But I find it a really useful kind of standardized way of looking at a business and the business fundamentals. I'm not going to go through the more in-depth look at the business model canvas. It's something I put in here basically just for if you wanted to, as you're thinking about your projects, think more about how they're structuring these in the Lean Launchpad and how to think about those. Go for it. But it's there as a link in the page. The next one I want to talk about is the value proposition canvas. So the value proposition section of the business model canvas is probably the most difficult one to really get a handle on how it's going to structure your business, in my thoughts. And so in thinking about the unique value proposition of your company, you're really thinking about things that you do for your customers and the pains that you resolve for your customers. And the value proposition canvas tries to quantify that. I'm going to pop back out to YouTube rather than my talking through that one.
Let's look at the value proposition canvas, a tool that will help you design, test, build, and manage great customer value propositions. It's like a plug-in to the business model canvas. The tool is based on two elements of your business model: the customer segment who you intend to create value for, and the value proposition which you believe will attract customers. With the value proposition canvas, you can map out both in more granularity and show the fit between what you offer and what customers want. The customer segment profile describes the characteristics of your customers in more detail. The profile is composed of the jobs your customers are trying to get done in their work and in their lives, the related pains outlining the negative aspects they hate or would like to avoid, and third, the gains describing the positive outcomes and benefits which your customers would love to have. Now let's look at the profile in more detail. Jobs describe an important issue your customers are trying to solve in their work or in their lives. It could be the tasks they're trying to perform and complete, the problems they are trying to solve, or the needs they are trying to satisfy. And then jobs can have a functional, social, or emotional intent. Now, some jobs will be crucial to the customers, others will be trivial. Then the second aspect here are the pains describing anything that annoys your customers before, during, and after getting a job done. This could be undesired costs and situations, negative emotions, or risks. And again, some customer pains will be severe, others light. And the third aspect of the profile are the gains describing the outcomes and benefits your customers require, expect, desire, or would be surprised by. This includes things like functional utility, social gains, positive emotions, and cost savings. And again, some outcomes and benefits will be more relevant to customers than others. These three elements of the profile describe the customer characteristics that you can observe in the market. Now let's look at the value proposition map describing the features of your value proposition which you are designing to address your customers' most important jobs, pains, and gains. The map is composed of the products and services your value proposition is built around, the pain relievers outlining how your products and services alleviate customer pains, and third, the gain creators describing the positive outcomes and benefits your products and services create for your customers. Now let's look at the map in more detail. First, the products and services simply outline the bundle of products and services that you're offering customers to help them get a functional, social, or emotional job done and to address their pains and gains. Now, the second aspect here, the pain relievers, make explicit how your products and services will alleviate specific customer pains before, while, and after the customer is trying to get a job done. They show which of all the customer pains your value proposition is addressing by eliminating or reducing them. And the next aspect here are the gain creators. They make explicit how your products and services create customer gains. They show which of all the customer gains your value proposition is addressing by creating benefits and outcomes. Now you have achieved a so-called problem-solution fit when the features of your value proposition perfectly match the characteristics of your customer segment profile. When the market validates this match and your value proposition gets traction with real customers, you have achieved a so-called product market fit. But don't forget, successful businesses have more than just a great value proposition. They have a great business model that makes a customer value proposition possible. Now, do you have what it takes to design great business models and value propositions?
Yeah. Great. So the two key terms there that I want to rub home, the feature fit, where you think you've designed your product to meet the needs of your customers, and then the market fit. We'll never get to market fit in this class, of course. That's a process of getting out in the market with a product and seeing if people are actually using it to solve their needs. But when you look at the way that a lot of the accelerators, things like Y Combinator, things like 500 startups, things that are kind of trying to get a business from this idea stage to a stage where there's actual paying customers. They're really working on that process of getting product market fit and getting people to that stage where people are paying for things. And so a lot of what you hear in the startup space around you're really kind of refining a minimum viable product until people are willing to pay for it is the second thing that was being discussed in there. Getting back from the pains and gains of the user to your product to get that product market fit. We'll just get the first part from our product into the features and leave it at that as far as this course goes, though. So at this point, I've got a couple things that we can do tonight. We have to have a discussion around Project 2 and form some project groups for Project 2, since that's going to be a group project. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. I could spend a bit of time going through the Google Analytics stuff. That's always a fun exercise, but it's a little bit tangential to what we actually have to get done for Project 2. Then we could spend a little bit more time on some of the GitHub pieces that are still giving people problems and do that in a smaller group in parallel with people forming product groups. What I've intended to do was spend a bit of time doing an exercise on value proposition canvas, but I think I'm going to scratch that and have us instead focus on the Project 2. Unless anybody is really amped on doing a value proposition stuff or doing the Google Analytics stuff. It's also kind of getting into midterm season, and so if we end a little bit early, if we get done with the Project 2, I suspect I'm not horribly disappointing anybody. So let's cut to the chase of what's necessary for a Project 2 and do that. Do we also, we're at the end of another hour, want to take 5 minutes before launching into projects, or just forge bravely ahead? Okay, run away if you need to, but we'll just forge bravely ahead then. Project 2 in here is, oh, wait a minute, we did that already. There it is. Yes, you saw the picture in the video. The picture is in the slides. Look at value proposition canvas. Project 2 is, in my opinion, the hardest of the 3 projects in here. Project 1, of course, was totally revamped from last term. It was just kind of a get started with JavaScript thing. It was barely a project in a lot of ways. Project 2, though, is the meat of launching a web business. By the time we get to Project 3, we're going to be filling in the corners of the back end to make the web pages work on this, and it will be more technically challenging. But the real difficulty in all of this is getting something that's a good product idea, getting the design to reflect that good product idea, and getting that first prototype standing up so that people can look at it and get an idea of your idea. That was a complicated, useless statement. Get an idea, get the main concept of your idea. So this is going to be done in groups. I prefer groups of 3 to 4. I will not accept individuals, so you cannot be a group of 1. A group of 1 isn't a group. In part because there's just more work here than a single person should try and do for the project. But also because it's really important to learn how to do software development in groups. So since part of the evaluation of this is how you're doing collaboration in GitHub, how you're doing collaboration across the business ideas, it really does need to be in a group. I've let a group of 5 happen before, but that's really getting too big. So groups of 3 or 4 are really the preferred size on this. So the core of it is that you'll be designing and implementing a website business. So we have to work on scope a lot. You're not going to create the next Facebook in this class. You're not going to create a 50 web page site in this class that sells everything under the sun in 15 different categories. So realistic scoping of the project is very, very important. What I would like out of all of this, though, is to set a grand ambition and tell a good story and then say, okay, but we're going to implement this little bitty slice of it. So rather than have something that is too small to actually be a viable business, I would rather have you propose something that is a viable business and then implement a tiny slice of that, whatever you can get done of that. And we'll work with some back and forth on the scoping of this to make sure that you're not biting off far more than you can chew or not doing something totally trivial. But think big and realistic in terms of the business plan and think small and manageable in terms of the implementation plan on all of this. I do have some technical requirements for what goes into the website. And basically, these are things that will follow along what some of the future classes are going to show how to build. And so I want us to have some commonalities in the websites that we propose. The first is that I would like each of you to have some idea of map in there. And this map it could be something as simple as where are my products produced, or where are my retail locations, or where are my offices, whatever it is in there. I want you to have some concept of a map in the site. I mean, in a classified site, it might be where the products that people are selling are sold. Who knows? I suspect in most sites you can fit the idea of a map. Now, if you just can't, then you have a business idea you really want to run after that doesn't have one of these requirements. Come talk to me. We can trade off a killer business idea you want to run after and are motivated to pursue versus some of the technical requirements. But I really want a map in there. The second element I would really like in there is a database. And a database is really just a list of things. It can be a list of people, it can be a list of products, it can be a list of documents. It's a list of stuff. And the things you can do with this database include searching, it includes categorizing, doing queries on it. We're going to be talking a lot about databases in one or two of the classes here in this course. And would like you to have some concept of a list of things on your website, so we can talk about databases specifically for your project. The last one, and this is the one I'm most willing to give on, if you don't come up with a way of getting this into your project, well, good enough. But I'd like you to think about what a virtual assistant or a chatbot could do for your website idea. And the main reason I want to do this is that this is one of the IBM Bluemix services we're going to look at. It is something that's getting very big in the website world these days for a couple reasons. The first one is that it's really, really expensive to do human in the loop consultations, either pre-sales or technical support consultations. And the more of this you can automate to intelligent virtual assistants, the more the costs you cut off your bottom line. The other is, of course, that AI is really coming along quickly. It's a quickly developing field and impresses people. And so it makes your stuff look really cool to have something automated that acts smart in there, if you do it well. Otherwise, it makes you look really, really bad if you don't do it well. And so in this first part of the project, for project 2, what I'm asking for in the chatbot is not an implementation. It's rather essentially a script. What things can people ask for and what responses will the chatbot provide? So that'll help us set up for when we come to one of the later classes what you actually implement for a chatbot. And don't go crazy on this. I mean, a small handful of questions that can be answered. Where are your stores? What do you sell? What brands do you provide? Half a dozen, maybe 10 things at the most that can be asked about. Keep your idea big and your scope small on these things. The deliverables that we have out of this for project 2. A business model canvas and a value proposition canvas for your website are the first thing. The second thing is 3 to 4 web pages, and I'd like these web pages to be hosted on GitHub, of course, and also exposed through GitHub pages. Because this is a front-end project, we do not have a requirement for a back-end. So I talked a bit in lesson 1 about this front-end, back-end distinction. That the front end is the user interface of your project or of your website, the thing that runs in the browser on your client's machines. The back end is the thing that runs up on the server to power your website. And in this project, there will not be a back end. There will not be a database. There will not be a chatbot server. There will not be any server serving up your website, other than just the web server that provides the pages down to your client that you run on the client. And this is the distinction of what can fit on GitHub pages and what cannot fit on GitHub pages. If something is purely a client website, it's just serving HTML and CSS and local actions to your client's browser, it can run on GitHub pages. As soon as you need a database, as soon as you need any intelligence services, as soon as you need a networking stack to communicate to other users, any chat functionality, anything like that, you're in the realm of back-end services, and GitHub Pages will not work for you anymore because they don't provide a back-end. And that's where I'd like to have Project 2 conclude as well, is that only build things that do not require a back-end for Project 2. So if you have a database in here, and I said that I would like a database to appear on your website, that database is going to have a hard-coded list of things in it for Project 2. You'll have a web page that it pops up a list of items you sell, and you'll type in each of the list of items you sell onto that web page, and make it a static web page. When we come to Project 3, we'll talk about how to actually create a database to dynamically populate it. But don't do any back-end work or any database work for Project 2. It's not in scope for this project. Anybody have questions on what's a front end and what's a back end? No? Okay, good. So a functional map is kind of an intermediate area between a front end and a back end, because the back end for maps is Google Maps. So you don't need your own back end to have a map on the page. You may not actually use it as you would if you were dynamically loading a list of products on your classified site and where they were being sold from out of a database and showing it on the map. But you can put a static map up and have it go against Google servers and still have it be part of a Project 2 project. And we're going to talk about maps here pretty quickly. So we will do a little bit of live mapping for Project 2. The SEO factors we talked about today are one of the deliverables for the project. But I want to really scope this, I'm talking about half a page discussing how you're designing your website with SEO in mind. So this consists of things like I'm doing the content and the wording in a way that my users ask about. I'm planning for a responsive page by doing this. Just a few statements to show that your design aspects have been informed by the SEO success factors table that we went over today. And then finally, I'm going to ask you on the day that this is due to do a presentation about your website design. This is what's basically called an elevator pitch. And a slightly longer version of it, a real elevator pitch, is something that's under a minute without any external props or aids. And designed to be a description of your business idea. You can tell somebody when you get on the elevator with them. Did a lot of work on elevator pitches. I went to a program called Singularity University here in 2010, I guess it was. They're a program to facilitate technology entrepreneurship. In my year, a lot of tech people were there and fewer business people. So they just grilled us on the elevator pitches. And it's really important to be able to give a concise description of your business idea in a way that is engaging and interests people. Now, we're a little bit longer than an elevator pitch in what I'm describing here, and that I would like you to actually do a walkthrough of your product concept as compared to a simple elevator pitch. And this means pointing to the pages that you design. We'll have the overhead for you to use, and telling people what your concept is there. You don't, for Project 2, have to actually do anything with those pages. So if you've got a drop-down that depends on a database, you won't have that implemented for Project 2. If you have something that goes and queries a server, queries a chatbot, you won't have that implemented, so you don't have to do that for Project 2. At most, I want you to be able to click on links to go between your pages and maybe make a selection in a list box or something. So no real complex functionality has to be implemented for your product walkthrough for Project 2 here. But it does have to be in web pages that are styled nicely in CSS pages that have appropriate link between those pages. And I'd like it to be at least 3 to 4 pages so it's actually a website and not just a single web page. And short, just 3 to 5 minutes max on this. If you have a really concise, powerful website idea you can get across in a minute or two, that's fine. Don't worry as much about going too short as going too long. We'll sound the gong and pull people off stage if you ever go over 5 minutes. 3 to 5 minutes is a good guideline, but certainly don't go over that. I think that's about it for the setup of Project 2. Things that I haven't covered that are burning questions on this. No? Okay. Everybody in a group's going to get the same mark on this project. I really discourage switching projects between Project 2 and Project 3 because we are going to build a back end for the Project 2 code in Project 3, so you're going to be a lot easier able to work on something that you've worked on the front end for. But I have had people want to switch between projects before, and it's not absolutely impossible, but would really discourage it. And one of the ways of trying to discourage it is to encourage you guys to, if within a project group there are problems and you're not meshing as a team or differing on business ideas you want to pursue or something like that, come to me really early and try and let me help propose ways of resolving that. I would like you guys, if at all possible, to stay in the project group that you're forming right now for both Projects 2 and Project 3 anyways. I'd like to have people send me an email, ideally by the time people leave, but if not by the time people leave, then by at the end of the week with the names of each of the people in your project group. And maybe I ought to, at this point, give a bit of time for folks to form into project groups. Or let me actually kind of ask this the other way around. Who in here does not have an idea of who they would want to form a project group with? Got half the class or so. Let's kind of just do a casual walk around, and those you all saw each other's hand who don't have project group ideas, and kind of have a chat for a few minutes about what you'd like to work on, and let me know if I can help facilitate this chat. But let's kind of go informal, casual, and get some project groups formed.
Do you guys have any business that you guys know?
Yeah, I reached out.
No, the other day I was teaching our our training to like rent. Google. Is it Eon? Yeah.
If you have something
that's just something like
originality and business ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
All explicit ones, become the first millionaire who has don't feel like it's serious like this. I've had people in my do pushing this It can be literally anything, but it's sometimes easier to not have it as video. So,
He's gonna do it on his phone.
think of things that you've seen websites that are like it before. So, I mean, field websites or websites or service websites that just kind of narrow down on something. You want to figure out originality is not a criteria.
It's like this business, like when you die, you sit down, well, not when you die, but like, they pretty much write your autobiography.
Criteria makes sense.
They sit you down and write like a person, they make their own book, like this series, like your own autobiography.
You guys have any business ideas?
It's been like done before, everything, but like, not like an actual, like,
Originality is not a criteria.
only for your family.
Yeah, I heard it.
You know, like if you find something out there
You're gonna go put out the homework.
it does have to be
It's fun building a lot of work.
Oh, no, we just phone call.
And just sending him an email.
Honestly, if we just split up all the work, like, value. So like one page is usually model one.
Are you guys?
And third one is like a half page discussion.
I guess you're still a little, yeah.
So like one of us took.
Kind of legit, but not necessarily original. So originality is not a criteria. Exactly, originality is not a criteria. I'd like to do it pretty rapid. I guess a lot of business there's sort of offers this combination. And so I guess they're digital
Honestly.
yeah. So a product or service and classes, supply collection, your website, expert guidance, selling supplies, stuff.
You could have given him a friend and not have more than one sport. It would be just for one issue. And then you could do like 5 days and I'll ask him if that's and could we have like selling things
Okay. Cool.
and then if we have like the chat squad be like, oh, I want to run my fire.
You ever work in Excel?
Sure, I think that's a great idea. I encourage you to kind of ways of scoping that down in that with the 2 or 3 chat interaction with the chatbot, you can get just a so think of ways of guiding the discussion to guide them to the
Well, you can have the chatbot for person. Hi.
yeah, that's this is initiated dialogue, which is versus everyone thinks. I've given them feedback on the government regarding the that you have to create a line in the database that says, here's the plan for here's the plan. You don't have I don't want to interrupt great conversations, and let's get back to them in a moment, but I see some people preparing to drift away in a minute, and I want to have 2 more slides before they do so, and then we'll pop back, and please continue these great conversations. And don't feel you have to drift away after I finish these. Please do get back to your group discussions whenever you like. But I want to talk about this coming week's homework, and then I want to talk about to prepare for next class, and then we'll jump back to group discussions. So in the homework, this is due October 11th before class. I want you to evaluate an existing website business for SEO and business model canvas factors. Think of this as a practice project or a practice homework for what you'll turn in with your project. And so I'll be able to get some idea on this homework as to the amount of depth you go into and the way that you lay the information out. I've just thrown Use Victoria up here as a site to do that with, but please choose another site. It'd be much more fun if everybody has their own site to have in here. Reading 20 descriptions of Use Victoria's SEO factors is going to bore me to death. So please do feel free to choose other sites. And I want you to evaluate it with respect to SEO success factors and fill out a business model canvas. Identify the technologies powering the website using that Google Chrome plugin that I showed in the slides today. And just a short description of what each one of those is. And if there are things that doing a quick Google search you can't find information on, like that HTML5 shiv that was in the one website, I've got no idea what that is. I might do a Google search and find a one-sentence description for it, but if there's things you can't find, let it go. What I'm really looking for in using the what runs this site plugin is identifying what the major things in there are: Google Analytics, Nginx, React versus Response.js or Vue.js or Angular. Just kind of an idea of what the major things in there are. And so what I'm going to probably do for the first part of next class is take 5 minutes to pull out the interesting responses people found on what runs those websites and talk about them just a little bit more in there. And of course, I want these checked into a repository and submitted on GitHub, because I can't have a homework without at least some command line GitHub interaction in there. I'd like you to turn in your own stuff for this one. The coding homeworks, I've been encouraging you to go ahead and work in groups if you want, because getting around a coding problem is something that having another head on it is very often useful for. For this one, though, I do want to make sure that each of you are individually able to go ahead and apply those SEO success factors and stuff. And so turn in an individual homework for this one, please. Questions about homework? Yeah.
How many success factors are you expecting?
Small handful. It's hard to give an exact number because some sites may really lend themselves to here are all the dozen things that are wrong with it, this success factor, this success factor, this success factor. Others might have just one or two that really stand out. As long as you've got a small handful, then I'm happy.
Do you want us to actually just write down the success factors that you want us to sort of like do like the storage numbers as well?
So those numbers are actually not as much a scoring as they are the weight that success factor is put on by the Google algorithm. And so I'd always encourage you to go with the more highly weighted success factors when you're evaluating your website, just because that's how Google rates it.
Yeah. And then technology documents, you want us to do like a channel file?
Doesn't really matter. I thought about calling them web pages for this homework, but I decided that that was enough work that just text documents is fine because we have projects to worry about. And I'd rather your effort primarily go towards the project and getting that going than having a very detailed homework this week. So just a text file check in is fine. Cool. And then the last thing in here, if there aren't other homework questions, is to prepare for next class. The one thing I really need y'all to do is to sign up for a Bluemix ID. That'll take a couple hours to be granted. Ideally, using your UVic website address if you can, or UVic email address rather if you can. We have to actually have these extended for a little bit longer than the 30-day normal trial period for a Bluemix account. And IBM, our contact at IBM has said that they'll do that, but prefer to do that for UVic addresses. If you don't use your UVic address, use another address, and that's fine. But if you do use your UVic address and can use that one to sign up for Bluemix, do so. Cool. Well, thanks a lot. Feel free to continue project group discussions if you want, or you do that on your own time if you prefer, because it's the middle of the night. Thanks.
Here's mine.